design products for a living, and I am an industrial designer. What I wanted to do today is do several things. I want to tell you how technology is changing the way I work, and by extension, kind of changing the world that you live in. I'd like to tell you that story through the story of everyday objects disappearing. But before I go there, I wanted to ask for a show of hand from the audience. Who in the audience know what an industrial designer is? If you know, can you raise? That's pretty impressive. But for those of you who don't know or aren't quite sure, I would ask you the following questions. What are you sitting on right now? What device did you use to make coffee this morning? Or what device did you use to tweet about the last speaker? Because all of these products have been designed by industrial designers. So we design most of the everyday objects you interact with. Industrial design is everywhere. And a world without industrial designers would end up looking a little something like this. So we need designers to design all of our products, everyday products. But in the relatively short time that I have been a designer, the profession of industrial design has changed quite dramatically. And I have too. And I'd like to give you a little bit of personal background. This is Jean Prévost. He is my grandfather, and he's the reason why I became an industrial designer. He was a mechanic, and all throughout his life, he would design products of all sorts, products, instruments, tools, and launch businesses out of his inventions. So anytime he would set his mind to something or try to create something, it would always be to try to solve the problem. And he would always come up with very creative solutions. And he would always end up with something that would make somebody's lives better. So he didn't call himself that way, but he was a designer. So naturally, next to him, he taught me how to tinker with things, how to get my hands dirty with mechanics, how to fix things, but more importantly, how to build physical objects. And he's been a great source of inspiration. This is why I became a designer. For me, it was a perfect opportunity to marry my mechanical inclinations, he taught me, and my artistic sense. It was a great source of inspiration. Now, this is Anton, my son. He's another source of inspiration. While my grandfather taught me about physical invention, my son taught me about personal reinvention. Now, you see him here playing on the PlayStation, one of these violent shoot-them-all video games, while watching a rated R episode of South Park on his iPod. So, when you see this, I think we can all agree to two things. One, I have great parenting skills, right? Because Anton wholeheartedly agreed to that statement. But two, as humans, we are changing. But let me explain what I mean by that. When I saw him do this, I was upset. That was my initial reaction. And I slapped him upside the head and I said, "Stop doing this, you can't do it." Because honestly, I couldn't do that, so I assumed that he couldn't do it. But the fact is that he was able to do relatively well. He was performing at the game, he was laughing at the jokes, he could actually do it. So this is the moment where I realized that we are changing. As humans, we're constantly evolving, and we're constantly reinventing ourselves. The next generation interacts with products in completely different ways than the generation before them. Now, to that point, there was a very good article in The Atlantic. It was about the power of design, and it was dealing about that very thing about generational difference in terms of how people interact with products from different ages. And it was using the example of the doorbell. Now, if I was to ask you, how would you go about interacting with such a simple device? Now, chances are, if you're like my grandfather or myself, you would use your forefinger, right? Because that's the most natural thing to do. But chances are that if you're like Anton, you've built so much dexterity in your thumbs by playing and texting that the most natural thing to do is to use your thumb. Now, for me, this is a perfect example of how technology is changing human behavior. But it's also a perfect example of how technology is forcing industrial designers to reinvent themselves. Now, speaking of reinvention, I've had to reinvent myself a number of times since I moved here. I moved here from Paris, France, to join one of the leading US consultancy here in the city. The name of the company is Bresslergroup, and it's based here in the heart of the city. Now, when I moved here, and that may have been a result of kind of cultural difference, of misunderstanding, people thought I was a bit of an artist. And at the time, I really didn't quite understand why they felt that way. But seriously, now if you were to ask me if I see it today, I'll tell you, yeah, no, I see it. I say that. I've tried to clean up a bit. But seriously, when I moved here, I was excited, but I was scared at the same time. I was excited because this is a country where an industrial designer can actually make it to the cover of Time magazine. This is Raymond Loewy in the 50s, and he's most often referred to as being the father of industrial design. But at the same time, he was born in Paris, raised in France, and then moved here to the US to make it big and invent industrial design. So that was very comforting to me. But still, I was scared because I was moving to a new country. I had to learn a new culture, new ways of working and living, and on top of that, I had to learn a new language. So when I got here, I had no choice. I had to change, and I had to reinvent myself on a personal level. Now, professionally, the changes have been quite significant as well. I'd like to walk you through a very short history of industrial design, just for context, so that I can then tell you the changes that it is currently going through. And to do that, we need to go back and look at the early days of mass production, early 1900s. Back then, there was very little need for product differentiation. Affordability, availability were big enough benefits. But soon, consumer expectations were starting to change because people grew tired of products that were all the same. And that change in consumer behavior led to the birth of industrial design. Now, at that point, companies started to turn toward industrial designers. They were looking for innovation. But initially, innovation in industrial design meant primarily styling for differentiation. And this is what Raymond Loewy did, that designer on the cover of Time magazine. And you see here examples of the products that he's very well known for. And I would call your attention to that pencil sharpener on the right-hand side there. That pencil sharpener did not do anything different than any of the other competitive products on the market at the time. But it looked differentiated, it looked streamlined, it was new at the time, it looked attractive. And that's a perfect example of what industrial designers did in the early days of industrial design. Now, when people talk about the birth of industrial design, they most often refer to Raymond Loewy. But here in the US, he had contemporaries in every city. And here in Philadelphia, his contemporary was Harold Van Doren. He was an architect. He built a design practice in the early 40s in Chicago, and then he moved that practice here to the city in Philadelphia. He was then succeeded by an industrial designer named Harper Landau. They actually worked together for about 10 years. And Harper Landau continued that design consultancy up until the early 70s. And you see here examples of some of the products that they worked on. Again, same thing, same time, styling for differentiation. Now, in the early 70s, actually the year I was born more than 40 years ago, an industrial designer fresh out of school named Peter Bressler bought Harper Landau's client lists. He founded Bresslergroup, and then he continued on the industrial design legacy here in the city. And you see here examples of some of the products that Peter worked on, from his first project, which was a stand-up wheelchair, to medical device on the left-hand side, all the way to groundbreaking solar roofing system on the right-hand side, with huge social and environmental implications and impacts. So you can see right there that between the beginning of industrial design and the end of the 1900s, there was a huge shift happening. And industrial design and industrial designers had to reinvent themselves to go from styling for differentiation toward solving real problems and making people's lives better. Now, today, two of my partners and I are embarking into a new era of industrial design. Technology is becoming so ubiquitous that it's finding its way in almost every product that we design. And what we're seeing is that there is another shift happening where we're designing less of the physical objects that we used to design, and we're moving toward designing more of the digital experiences. But I'll show you this through a couple of examples. This is a picture I found not long ago, a few days ago, of me when I first started working with Peter. And to look at the changes that industrial design is going through right now, you need to look no further than this very ubiquitous product that is the thermostat here on the wall. And this is the story of everyday objects disappearing. So if you look back at early designs for a thermostat like this one, this is a very famous design. It's a thermostat from Honeywell. It's called the Round. It's considered to be an icon of industrial design. There's one of these at the Smithsonian. And it's a perfect example of good design. It's a simple-looking device, very intuitive, very simple to use, but this is a very physical object. Anytime you would want to change anything about it, you would have to stand up, walk to it, and basically physically interact with it and change the settings, morning, evening, every day of the week, every week of the year. And that soon became a problem. A problem that got resolved and fixed by the addition of technology. And here you see, you probably have seen this in many homes. You probably have it at home as well. But here you can see that the design has shifted already. It's not so much about the physical object anymore. It's very much about the digital experience. But this solved a real problem because you can program your eating and cooling cycles, and you can set it and forget it. That was improving people's lives hugely. That made sense. Still, that wasn't without problems because people found it frustrating to basically spend the time to do the programming because nobody really did figure out how to do it very easily. Then come the next generation of products that you're probably familiar with, the Nest, which is kind of combining the best of both worlds because in the course of maybe a week or two, you're going to walk to it and teach it exactly what you want the temperature settings to be, and it will learn automatically and set the programming by itself. And this is very good design. It makes total sense. And this is probably why this device has been so hugely successful. Now, this is still, with some problems because it is still a very physical object. And if you want to change anything, you need to physically interact with it. So, of course, there are other options. And this is the Tato box, and it's a competitor to the Nest. And you can see here that we're stretching, and we're going even further in that shift away from the physical object toward the digital experience. Now, that white box on the wall, this is the thermostat, but it's been defeatured of any kind of design elements, and all the design effort is going into the design of the digital interface. And it goes a step further because this dumb white box that you see on the wall, you really don't need to have it on your wall because you don't interact with it. So you can hide it somewhere, and all you're left with is your digital experience. Now, this makes sense for all of us, because now we can control our heating and cooling needs basically from anywhere at any time. And by the way, this solution has all the features and benefit and more of all the products of the past. So when you think of this object, the thermostat as a physical object is going to disappear under the influence of technology. It's called technology convergence. And this is reinventing the way I do my work every day. Now, technology convergence is forcing industrial designers to reinvent themselves again. Now, if you're a skeptic like I am, you could say, okay, well, that's a good example, nice, but I don't think this is going to affect every product around me. And I will agree with you, it won't affect every single object. But I think that we all have to realize that it will be impacting a lot of the objects that we have around us. Now, let me give you another quick example. Familiar with this? You probably used to have one. You probably don't have one anymore. Very physical object, ignition key to start your car and turn it off, right? Most of you have probably graduated away from this and now have a key fob with a key on it, still a physical key. But this makes total sense because you can open your car and close it from a distance. It makes your life easier, right? Some of you with more recent cars probably have seen that physical object of the ignition key become invisible. It's still there, hidden on the inside, but it's disappearing. And the usability is great. You don't even have to interact with that key fob. Keep it in your pocket, your purse, your coat, and then just walk to your car, push a button, and you're on your way. But of course, this doesn't stop here, because technology convergence is going to push all of that functionality to smartphones, but also wearable technology. Now, GM is offering on all of their 2014 models equipped with OnStar this very functionality where you can do everything a key fob could do and more on your phone. And it's only a matter of time before all GM models offer this functionality, and by extension, all brands of car offer that functionality. So these are two examples, the thermostat and the key fob, of everyday objects being affected by technology convergence and slowly disappearing over time. But if you think of all the other objects that we have around us, and I'm not going to go into every single one of them, and this is really just a shorthand, there's many, many more objects around us that we use every day that are slowly going to be affected by the exact same thing, technology convergence. And because change is accelerating, I think it's only going to be a matter of a few years, and in the next 5 years, you will see a lot of these objects completely disappear or be changed forever. Now that phasing out of the physical artifacts, this is the future of industrial design. So as designers, we moved from styling products to solving real problems to inventing and designing digital experiences. Now, these changes were very significant, and throughout all this time where industrial design had to reinvent itself and change quite dramatically, we've seen that basically we're moving away from designing the physical objects toward designing the digital experiences. But just like design has reinvented itself in this shift, so can our cities. Our cities can also move away from manufacturing the physical objects and move toward manufacturing the digital experiences. Now, a city like ours, doesn't need hundreds of thousands of assembly line workers to boom anymore. A city like ours can become a hub and a center for innovation and a leader for innovation with only a few thousand designers, entrepreneurs, and creative thinkers. And to me, all it takes is really to stay nimble and so open to waves of change that you're built for reinvention. Now, whether that means reinventing a career, a business, an industry, or even a city. When I first started designing, I was designing physical objects. Now, they're slowly starting to disappear before my eyes. And these changes have profound impacts on the way we behave, the way we work, and the way we live. When I was learning next to my grandfather, he taught me that design was all about physical invention. And then my son taught me that, we are changing, and that design is not about physical invention. Design is about personal reinvention. Now, these changes are not just affecting me as an industrial designer. I know, and I'm pretty sure that they are affecting you as well. Think, what are these small changes happening over time all around you and slowly pushing you toward reinvention? So my question to you is, are you ready to reinvent your city like many of the speakers that you've seen and heard today? Are you ready to reinvent yourself? Because as you do so, my advice is to be sure to listen to your elders, but be equally sure to learn from the next generation. Because you are already full of answers. Thank you.